Now, let us learn the lesson loops. In this lesson, we would be learning why to use loops, what are loops, and types of loop statements, and finally the concept of infinite loop. So why to use loops? Loops in programming come to use when we need to repeatedly execute a block of statements. Now for example, we want to print hello world statement 10 times. This can be done in the following way. We can write the printf statement 10 times. But now, if we need to print this message 100 times or even more, like 1 lakh times, how to do that? This is the need where the loop comes in action. A loop is a statement that needs to be written only once, and the loop will be executed various times. In the previous example, it will be executed 10 times. In computer programming, a loop is a sequence of instructions that is repeated until a certain condition is reached. An operation is done, such as getting an item of data and changing it. And then some condition is checked, such as whether a counter has reached a prescribed number or not. If the counter has not reached the desired number, the next instruction in the sequence returns to the first instruction in the sequence and repeat it. But if the counter is reached, the next instruction falls through to the next sequential instruction or branches outside the loop. Now let us learn types of loop. There are mainly two types of loops: entry control loop and exit control loop. Entry control loop are the loops. In this type of loops, the test condition is tested before entering the loop body. For loop and while loop are the examples of entry control loop. Whereas in exit control loop, the test condition is tested or evaluated at the end of loop body. Therefore, the loop body will execute at least once, irrespective of whether the test condition is true or false. Do while loop is exit control loop. Now let us start our discussion with for loops. A for loop is a repetition control structure which allows us to write a loop that is executed a specific number of times. The loop enables us to perform n number of steps together in one line. A loop variable, also known as counter, is used to control the iterations of the loop. Now the for loop has three expressions: initialization expression, test expression, and update expression. Now let us consider that this is the start of the for loop, where the counter is initialized. In initialization expression, we have to initialize the loop counter to some specific value. Then comes the test expression, where the condition is tested. In test expression, we have to test the condition. If the condition evaluates to be true, then we execute the body of the loop, that is the statement written inside the braces. And then comes the update expression. Very often it is increment or decrement of the counter. After executing loop of the body, this expression increments or decrements the loop variable by some value. The syntax for loop is as shown. It starts with the keyword for, and within the round brackets, first we write the initialization expression, then comes the test expression separated by a semicolon, and then comes the update expression separated by a semicolon. And within this curly braces is the body of loop. Now the counter gets initialized first, and then it tests this condition written here. If the condition happens to be true, body of the loop is executed and the expression is updated. As soon as the expression is updated, the test condition is checked. If it comes to be true, then the body of loop is executed and it goes on till the condition does not become false. The second type is while loop. While studying for loop, we have seen that the number of iterations is known beforehand. That is, the number of times the loop body is needed to be executed is known to us. But while loops are used in situations where we do not know the exact number of iterations of loop beforehand. This loop is terminated on the basis of test condition. We already know that a loop consists of three statements: initialization expression, test expression, and update expression. The syntax for these three loops differs on the placement of these three statements. So let us look at the while loop syntax. First, expression is initialized. Then the condition is checked. If the condition happens to be true, inside the block of the while loop, the expression is updated and again it goes to check the condition. Again, if the condition happens to be true, block of the code is executed and there's an update expression. Again it goes to check the condition. Now if the condition happens to be false, the control jumps out of the while loop. The syntax for while loop is, firstly we initialize the expression outside the while loop. Then comes the keyword while, where condition is specified within this round bracket. This expression is tested here, and if it happens to be true, then the body of loop is executed and expression is updated. Again, it checks the condition, that is the test expression, and if it happens to be true, then the body of loop is executed, and so on. Now comes the exit control loop, that is do while loop. In do while loop also, the loop execution is terminated on the basis of test condition. The main difference between do while loop and while loop is, in this, the condition is tested at the end of the body. Therefore, it is known as exit control loop, whereas the other two which we discussed previously are known as entry control loops. It is interesting to know that in do while loop, the loop body will execute at least once, irrespective of the test condition. Let us look at the flowchart. Here, A is initialized and print A is the body of do while loop. It prints the value of A. While exiting, it checks the condition. If A is less than or equal to 5. If it happens to be true, as in this case it is true, the expression is updated, that is A equals to A plus 1. And again, it goes inside the body of loop and it again prints A. So now the value of A is 2. 2 is less than or equal to 5 happens to be true, again it is updated and it goes into the block of loop, and so on. The syntax for do while loop is, initialization expression lies before the do while loop, then comes the keyword do, followed by the body of loop and update expression. Outside this curly brace comes the while keyword followed with a test expression where the condition is tested. Note the semicolon at the end. Most of the time we forget and the compiler throws an error. Now comes the concept of infinite loop. An infinite loop is often sometimes called as endless loop, is a piece of code that lacks a functional exit so that it repeats indefinitely. An infinite loop occurs when a condition always evaluates to be true. Usually, infinite loop is considered as an error. Strange, isn't it? Now let us see the applications of these loops. When and where to use these loops. Use for loop where the number of iterations is known beforehand. That is, the number of times the loop body is needed to be executed is known. Use while loop where exact number of iterations are not known, but the loop termination condition is known. And use do while loop if the code needs to be executed at least once, such as a menu-driven programs. Let's have a quick recap for loops. A loop is a sequence of instructions that is repeated until a certain condition is reached. A loop that lacks a functional exit and is repeated infinitely is thus called an infinite loop or an endless loop. If we know the exact number of iterations, use for loop. If we do not know the exact number of iterations but the condition is known, use while loop. Whereas, if the loop has to be executed at least once, use do while loop. Next, we would be having assignment on loops.